Why do Jewish children as young as 3 years old receive their first lessons about money, wealth, and commerce before they can even read a complete sentence? Why do Jewish families treat financial education not as something you learn in college or figure out on your own as an adult, but as something as fundamental as learning to speak? The answer is hidden in a tradition so old and so deliberately guarded that most of the world has never even heard of it. And it explains why a community representing less than 0.2% of the global population has produced more billionaires, more Nobel Prize winners in economics, and more generational wealth than any other group in recorded human history. My name is Rabbi Amram, and for the past 43 years I have devoted my life to studying the ancient texts of the Talmud and Kabbalah. My grandfather was a respected Kabbalist in Jerusalem. His father before him taught these principles in a small yeshiva in Krakow, Poland, before the war. This knowledge has been passed down within my family for 7 generations. I remember being a small boy, no more than 4 years old, sitting on my grandfather's lap at the Shabbat dinner table. He placed 2 coins in my hand, 1 silver, 1 copper. He closed my fingers around them and said, "Amram, feel the difference. One is heavier, one is lighter. But which one is worth more and why?" I did not know the answer. I could barely count to 10. But that moment, that question, planted a seed in my mind that shaped my entire relationship with wealth for the rest of my life. And that is exactly how it was designed to work. What I'm about to reveal today will fundamentally change how you think about money, about education, and about why your own financial struggles may have roots that go all the way back to your childhood. There is one specific practice I will share toward the end of this teaching that Jewish families perform every single week with their children, and when you hear it, you will understand immediately why their children grow up with a completely different relationship to wealth than everyone else. But everything I teach before that practice is essential context, so stay with me through the entire teaching. I saw the devastating consequences of financial ignorance for the first time when I was 23 years old and working as a young rabbi in a community center in Brooklyn. A man came to see me, a good man, hardworking, honest, in his mid-40s. He sat across from me, and he could barely speak. He told me that he had just lost everything. His home, his savings, his retirement, all of it gone because he had co-signed a loan he did not understand for a business partner he trusted but should not have. He looked at me and said, "Rabbi, nobody ever taught me. Nobody ever sat me down and explained how any of this works. I learned about history in school. I learned about science. I learned about literature. But nobody, not my parents, not my teachers, not anyone, ever taught me how money actually works. And now I am 45 years old and I have nothing." That conversation haunted me, and it made me realize something that my grandfather had tried to teach me years earlier. The greatest form of poverty is not the absence of money. It is the absence of financial wisdom. And the reason Jewish families have survived and thrived through every persecution, every exile, every attempt to destroy them, is not because they are born with some special ability. It is because they refuse to let their children grow up financially illiterate. They treat financial education the same way they treat teaching a child to pray, to read Hebrew, to understand right from wrong. It is not optional. It is not something that happens naturally. It is a sacred obligation passed from parent to child with the same seriousness as any religious teaching. If this already resonates with something deep inside you, subscribe to this channel right now and turn on notifications. Every week I share ancient Jewish wisdom about wealth and prosperity that has been protected for generations. Subscribe now so you never miss a teaching that could change your family's financial future forever. Let me tell you what your experience was. I know because it is the same story for 90% of the people watching right now. When you were growing up, nobody taught you about money. Your parents either never talked about it at all, or they talked about it only when they were stressed, arguing, or afraid. Money was either a taboo subject wrapped in shame and silence, or it was a source of tension and anxiety that filled the house with heaviness. You learned about geography and mathematics and the capitals of countries you will never visit, but you graduated from school without understanding what interest is, how debt compounds against you, how to evaluate an investment, how to negotiate, how to build wealth that lasts beyond a single paycheck. And so, you entered the adult world financially blind. You made mistakes that cost you years. You trusted people you should not have trusted with your money. You bought things that ate your wealth instead of feeding it. You followed advice from people who were just as lost as you were. And none of this was your fault, because nobody ever gave you the foundation you needed. You were sent into a world that runs entirely on money without a single lesson on how money actually works. The Talmud would call this a profound failure, not of the child, but of the parents and the community that raised them. In Tractate Kedushin, page 29a, the Talmud lists the specific obligations a father has to his son. He must circumcise him, he must redeem him, he must teach him Torah, he must teach him a trade, and he must teach him to swim. The rabbis debated these obligations for centuries, and the consensus was clear. Teaching a child to be economically self-sufficient is not a suggestion. It is a commandment equal in weight to teaching him Scripture. Rabbi Yehuda goes even further and says that a father who does not teach his son a trade is as if he taught him robbery, because a person without economic skills will eventually be forced to take from others to survive. This is not a metaphor. This is Talmudic law. And it reveals something profound about how Jewish culture views financial education. It is not a luxury for wealthy families. It is a moral obligation for every family, regardless of income. Write in the comments right now these exact words. I will teach my children what I was never taught. I read every comment personally, and this declaration is not just for me. It is a promise to yourself and to the next generation. Now let me show you exactly how Jewish families turn this principle into practice. Because the genius is not just in the philosophy, it is in the specific methods they use at specific ages, methods that have been refined across 3,000 years of observation about how children learn. The first method begins before a child can even speak. Jewish families expose their children to commerce and exchange from the earliest possible age. In traditional Jewish homes, even toddlers are brought to the market, to the shop, to the family business. They watch transactions happen. They see money change hands. They observe negotiation, exchange, the relationship between value and price. This is not accidental. This is deliberate immersion. My grandfather told me that a child who watches 1,000 transactions before the age of 5 understands money in their bones, not in their head. And there is a profound difference between the two. Head knowledge can be forgotten. Bone knowledge becomes instinct. The Talmud, in Tractate Sukkah 42a, discusses at what age a child becomes obligated to perform certain commandments. And the rabbis use a fascinating standard. They say a child is ready when he knows how to shake the lulav, when he knows how to wrap himself in a tzitzit. The principle underneath is developmental readiness, not arbitrary age. And Jewish families apply this same principle to money. They do not wait until a child is old enough for a bank account. They begin when the child is old enough to grasp an object, to trade one toy for another, to understand that giving something away means you no longer have it. That is the foundation of all economic understanding, and it begins before age 3. The second method is what I call the Shabbat economy. Every Friday evening, Jewish families around the world gather for Shabbat dinner. And in many traditional homes, this dinner includes something that most outsiders never see. Children are given specific financial responsibilities related to the meal and the household. Even young children might be responsible for setting aside coins for tzedakah, the charity box. They learn to count, to portion, to allocate. They learn that some money is for the family, some is for others, and some is for the future. My grandfather told me that the Shabbat dinner table is the first classroom of wealth. He said, Amram, everything a child needs to know about money, they can learn by watching how a wise family prepares for Shabbat, how they budget for the meal, how they prioritize, how they give before they consume, how they make something beautiful without being wasteful. These are not abstract lessons delivered in a classroom. These are lived experiences repeated every single week for the entire duration of a child's upbringing. 52 Shabbat dinners a year for 18 years. That is over 900 financial lessons embedded into the rhythm of family life. The third method is storytelling. The Talmud itself is largely built on stories, on parables, on case studies from real commercial disputes, and Jewish families continue this tradition at home. My grandfather never lectured me about money. He told me stories. He told me about his own father who arrived in Jerusalem with nothing after fleeing Poland, and how he rebuilt by following these exact principles. He told me about merchants in ancient Jerusalem who became wealthy not through luck, but through discipline. He told me about men who lost everything because they violated the laws of honest commerce, and men who prospered because they honored them. Every story had a lesson embedded inside it, but the lesson was never stated directly. He would tell the story and then look at me and say, "What do you think that means?" And I had to extract the principle myself. This is teaching through discovery, and it is far more powerful than teaching through instruction. When a child discovers a principle on their own through a story, that principle becomes theirs. It lives inside them in a way that no lecture, no textbook, no classroom presentation ever could. Pause right now and write in the comments, "The Shabbat table is the first classroom of wealth." Share this declaration because someone else watching needs to hear it too. The fourth method is early responsibility with real consequences. In many Jewish families, children are given actual financial responsibility at an age that would shock most modern parents. Not pretend responsibility with play money, real responsibility with real stakes. A child might be given a small amount of money to manage for the week and told that they must allocate it between three purposes: something for themselves, something for charity, and something for savings. If they spend it all on themselves, there is no punishment, but there is a conversation, and that conversation, repeated week after week, month after month, year after year, builds a financial consciousness that becomes permanent. The Talmud, in Tractate Bava Batra, discusses the concept of training children in mitzvot, in commandments and good deeds, from a young age. The rabbis call this chinuch, which means education, but it literally means inauguration or initiation. The idea is that you are inaugurating the child into a way of life. You are not simply giving them information, you are shaping their identity. A child who grows up managing money, giving charity, saving a portion, and discussing financial decisions at the dinner table does not become an adult who is confused by money. That child becomes an adult who relates to wealth the way a musician relates to an instrument. With familiarity, with confidence, with instinct, developed over years of practice. The fifth method, and this is the one I told you about at the beginning, the one that ties everything together. Jewish families practice what I call the generational conversation. It happens at the Shabbat table, during holidays, in quiet moments between parent and child. It is the ongoing, never-ending conversation about wealth, values, discipline, and purpose that flows from one generation to the next like water through an ancient channel. My grandfather did not sit me down once and deliver a financial lecture. He talked to me about money every week for 20 years, small observations, questions that made me think, stories that revealed principles, corrections when I made mistakes, delivered not with anger but with patience. He would see me wanting to buy something impulsive, and he would not say no. He would say, "Tell me why you want that. Tell me what it will give you tomorrow that you do not have today." And I would think about it. And most of the time I would put the item back on the shelf. Not because he forbade it, but because his question revealed something I had not considered. This is Masorah. This is the generational transfer I spoke about in my last teaching. But here it is applied specifically to childhood, and when you see it in this context, you understand why it is so devastatingly effective. A child who has 20 years of weekly financial conversations with a wise parent does not enter adulthood unprepared. That child enters adulthood with a 20-year head start over everyone else, and that head start compounds across decades the same way money compounds. The gap between someone who received this education and someone who did not only grows wider with every passing year, This is why Jewish children learn about money before they learn to read, not because money is more important than reading, but because the window for shaping a child's fundamental relationship with wealth is small and precious, and once it closes, it is extraordinarily difficult to reopen. The habits, beliefs, and instincts a child develops about money before the age of 10 will govern their financial behavior for the rest of their life. Jewish families understood this 3,000 years ago. Modern psychology is only now beginning to confirm what the Talmud has taught all along. Let me share something honest with you. When my own children were young, I made the mistake of assuming they would absorb these principles naturally, just by being in my home. I was busy. I was traveling and teaching. I told myself they would figure it out. And then one day, my eldest son, who was 14 at the time, made a financial decision so reckless that it stopped me cold, and I realized I had been giving strangers the wisdom that belonged first to my own children. I corrected course immediately. I began the Shabbat conversations my grandfather had with me. I began the stories, the questions, the small responsibilities. And within a year, I watched my son transform from someone who was careless with money into someone who thought about every financial decision with intention and awareness. It was not too late, but it would have been so much easier if I had started when he was 3. Over 43 years, I have watched families apply these methods, and the results are always the same. Children who receive this education grow into adults who build wealth naturally, who avoid the traps that consume most people's finances, who understand the difference between assets and liabilities as instinctively as they understand the difference between hot and cold. And more importantly, they grow into adults who pass the same education to their own children. The cycle continues, the wealth grows, the wisdom deepens, generation after generation after generation. You now understand something that most people will never learn. Financial education is not a subject, it is a practice. It is not something you give a child in a single conversation or a single course. It is something you weave into the fabric of daily family life through exposure, through responsibility, through stories, through questions, and through the ongoing generational conversation that Jewish families have been having for 3,000 years. And here is what is beautiful about this knowledge. You do not need to be Jewish to apply it. You do not need wealth to begin. You do not need special training or certification. You need only the decision to start. Start the conversations. Start the stories. Start giving your children real responsibility with real consequences. Start treating financial education as the sacred obligation that it is. The best time to start was when your children were 3. The second best time is right now. If this teaching opened your eyes to something you had never considered before, subscribe to this channel right now and turn on notifications. Every week I share ancient Jewish wisdom about wealth, prosperity, and financial protection that has been guarded for generations. This knowledge can change your family's trajectory for decades to come, but only if you stay connected. Leave a comment telling me what financial lesson you wish someone had taught you as a child. Write, I will break the cycle of financial ignorance in my family. I read every single comment, and your story might inspire the next teaching I create. If you know a parent or grandparent who wants their children to grow up financially wise, share this video with them right now. You could be giving them the most important parenting insight they have ever received. And hit the like button so this ancient wisdom reaches every family that deserves to hear it. May you have the courage to teach your children what no one taught you. May your dinner table become the first classroom of wealth for the next generation. May your stories plant seeds in young minds that grow into forests of prosperity. May your family never again enter the world financially blind. And may the wisdom you pass down today echo through your bloodline for 100 generations to come. Shalom.